Hold up.
Hi.
Is that me? I think that's you. I had a Harmony. That did not taste like Harmony.
Tastes like water.
Yeah. So my name's Peter Fay. I'm one of your teammates on the team. I'm also a LCI, a licensed or league certified instructor for the League of American Bicyclists, who's sponsoring this class that we're doing. It was working earlier. Sorry for the delay. Usually we're a little bit more organized. Usually we do the class in the room next door. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Wait just 1 second. Oh, in the meantime, hey, y'all just go woohoo! Woo! Not literally, but okay, you want to do that? Hold on. I'm trying to stall. Sorry, my laptop wouldn't hook up to the projector, so we're using a Mac, and I don't have a Mac at home, so I'm trying to figure out how to make everything work as well. But yeah, all right. So that's a little bit about me. So I'm a league certified instructor. I've done about 20-ish MS rides, a couple in Dallas, mostly the Houston to Austin or Houston to College Station rides. I spent 10 years as a ride marshal. I haven't picked it up again since since COVID. I've got 2 little kids now, and if you saw somebody come over here and drop off a little bag of stuff for me, that was my 2 kids and my wife. I forgot something this morning. I'm also an Ironman. Did that a few years back, so that was pretty awesome. I don't know if you've heard of, there's a bike ride, Seattle to Portland. That's a really good ride if you're ever up in the Seattle area. It's very hilly though. And I used to bartend for St. Arnold. If anybody went to the brewery before it moved to this location when it was over on Carbach Street, I was one of the volunteers that came and served people on the weekends and drank free beer. More free beer, I guess I would say. So a little bit about me. A little housekeeping. Hopefully everybody signed in. The big sign-in sheet was for everybody. If you're going to do we have some drills at the end of the presentation that we'll do in the parking lot outside. If you want to participate in those, I just need you to sign a waiver and don't drink too much beer. Okay? If you want to drink lots of beer, that's fine. Just you're welcome to come watch the skills section. Just don't participate if you've had too many beers. All right, please. Then we got an emergency exit right here if we need it. If you need water, Nate can hook you up at the bar. I think there's a water fountain next to the bathrooms back there. Any questions on any of that? Nope. So one of the core principles of all the teachings that the League of American Bicyclists does is this statement that cyclists fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles. And it comes from this book, Effective Cycling. It was written by this guy, John Foster, a couple decades ago, actually. And then the League of American Bicyclists took basically the stuff that he wrote in his book and made it part of an education program. And they also do a lot of outreach within cities, different parts of government, trying to promote infrastructure for safe cycling as well. So today we're going to have we'll cover three general topics. We're going to talk about bicycles and equipment, the core safe riding skills that are part of the League of American Bicyclists teachings that have to be presented in any league-sponsored curriculum, as well as some specific group riding skills. We'll talk a little bit about MS 150 specific stuff, but it's mostly geared towards any group ride, right? And then for those of you that want to stay at the end, we'll go outside the parking lot, and we have some on the bike skills and drills that we can do. All right, my clicker's not working. All right, so does everybody have a bike that they want to that they're planning on riding the MS-150 at already? Maybe a little bit-ish. But most folks are going to ride some kind of road bike like that, right? But if you haven't done the MS before, you will see all of these, even sometimes one of those, right? I haven't seen one in a few years, but it's very impressive seeing somebody on a unicycle, especially like in the hills. To me, like the scariest thing would be going downhill. Like going uphill, like very challenging, but then you go, it's fixed gear, right? So like if you're going fast down the hill, your feet are just like, spinning really, really fast. So I think you'd be braking the whole way down. It's crazy. But yeah, there's, you see some tandems, you see recumbent bicycles. There's a wide variety in like what these things look like. And a lot of people will ride on, hybrids or mountain bikes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you will certainly get there faster if you have a mountain bike. There's no need to buy a $3,000 road bike.
Unless you're buying from Trek.
Yeah.
Just an FYI, we are partners. Everything's good to go. Sorry, I just bringing that up. That's it.
Yep. And if you want to ride with the A group, the faster your bike is, the better, right?
Yes.
So the most important thing about your bicycle is having it properly fitted. If you buy a new bike from a bike shop, it should include a fitting and adjustments for like a year after you purchase the bicycle. So if you have discomfort on the bike, go back to the bike shop you bought it at and get it fitted. If you bought it someplace else on Craigslist or whatever, you can pay a relatively nominal fee for a bike shop to get it fitted for you. It'll make your life a lot better if you're having any kind of discomfort on the bicycle, to have it fitted to your geometry. So the most important things for the fitting, you can see right here there's like a plunge bob. You want your knee to be in line with the pedal. When you have the pedals at 90 and 270 degrees, you can see like the feet are front and back, right? So that plunge bob should go through the center of the pedal. And then the other thing you want is when your cranks are at top and bottom, like 0 degrees and 180 degrees, you want to have a bend in your knee that's about between 24 and 34 degrees. So you can see like the angle of the knee right there. If your seat's too low, then the angle will be too high. If your seat's too high, then you're having a hard time touching the bottom of the pedals, and your knee is extended too much, and that can cause problems with your knees. So make sure you have those things right. So I'm not going to go over every part of the bicycle, but I'm just going to say it's important to understand or to know what the basic features of your bike are, and we'll talk a little bit about individual parts as the presentation goes on. But if you look at that and you're scared because you don't know what a bunch of the things mean, it'd be good to just go find one of these diagrams and look at it and make yourself a little bit familiar with it. So we're talking just a little bit about shifting. So this is a chain, looking at it from like a bird's eye view. So you've got the chain in the middle in your chain ring, your front crank, and then it's in the middle of the cassette, right? So you're kind of in a middle gear on both sides, and your bike frame would be right here. If you're like you're looking down while you're riding the bike, right? So if you're in this position, is this the highest gear or lowest gear? Easiest, right? So you got the chain closest to the bike frame, and it's all in line. Like both sets of gears are close to the frame. And then for the opposite, if you want the highest gear to most difficult, the fastest, you have the chain all the way to the outside, right? What you don't want is one all the way to one side and one all the way to the other side. That's going to give you like the equivalent of a middle gear, but it caused a lot of stress on the chain and a lot of wear on the components. Does that make sense? So a lot of us, when we first get into like road riding, we're a little bit scared of the shifters and which one does which thing. All I can say is like, you just got to get out there and practice it. If you can find a buddy that rides at about your same pace and like shift when they do and do the same thing they do, that's a good way to kind of get comfortable with it. As far as things to carry on a bike, I think one of the most important things is having some way to change a flat tire. Even if you don't know how, it's great if everybody knows how to do it, but even if you don't know how to do it, it's a lot easier to get somebody to help you if you have the stuff. All right? So you need some way to inflate your tires. There's a frame pump there, or a CO2 cartridge and a CO2 cartridge pump. Both of those will work. If you have the CO2, you probably need 2 of those canisters in case you have 2 flats. They're good for like 1.5 flats each, but you need 2. And then to actually change the flat, you're gonna need something like you're gonna need a tire lever typically to get the tire off of the wheel and to get it back on sometimes. You'll need preferably 2 tubes. A lot of times people get 2 flats on a ride. If they get a flat, they get 2 because oftentimes when you get a flat, it's because something went through your tire, and it's not uncommon for people to miss whatever debris or it was that caused the flat in the first place, and you get a second flat and you go, oh no, I missed something. Then you find a piece of glass or thorn or whatever that's in your tire, but if you don't have a second tube, then you're in trouble. Yep. Other things, you can carry, there's these little patch kits, which are handy if you run into multiple flats beyond however many spares or spare tubes you have. These are very easy to carry with you, and if you get into a bind, you can always use these. Or if you run into somebody who's riding a bicycle that didn't bring their stuff, you can use these for their tubes, especially if it's a wonky tire size. You don't have to worry about finding the right tube. And then there's multi-tools. Recommend everybody have something like one of these. You got a bunch of different Allen heads on them. Hopefully you get one that's not rusted like this one, but it'll still work. So you got a Phillips head on here, the different Allen keys that you need. There's even like a spoke tool on this one. So these are good to have for helping you adjust things.
Speaking of Trek, or speaking of tools, 15% on all tools and accessories and clothing at Trek. Just an FYI, so you don't really have an excuse not to get a multi-tool. Or tubes, or anything.
So it's also very important to know your bike and to know what's required to change your tire. Like for me, because I have these really deep rims, like I have extensions on the valves, so I need an extra wrench to get those valve extensions off and on, right? So if you have something that's special, you need to know that and make sure you have the tools for it. And then other things are just good to carry with you on a regular basis. Sunscreen, you almost always need sunscreen in Houston, even in the winter. I keep a copy of my ID in my saddlebag just in case I get wiped out and I didn't bring it with me that day. If there's something for somebody to find out who I am. You can also get those road IDs if you're up around your ankle. A couple of dollars I keep in my saddlebag, so if I forget my credit card that day or somebody will take cash, you can get a drink at the rest stop. Chapstick, and
Butt butter.
yeah, butt butter. A lot of people like it, something to ease the chafing in your chamois.
Just something you're
Right. These were given out by the MS Society a few years ago. They're like alcohol wipes for cleaning your hands. Either these or like hand sanitizer. I always try and keep with me. When you're changing your tire, a lot of times you get like bike grease or chain grease on your hands, and alcohol cuts through that stuff really easy. It's also good when you go to the porta potty and there's no nothing to wash your hands with or sanitize or anything too, right? So of course, we should all have our helmets, right? And then, most of us choose to have some kind of bicycle-specific shoe, right?
I guess the last pair is distracting.
Yeah, so like I've got the two Shimano versions. You got the big cleats for Shimano, which are your traditional road style cleats, and then these look like sneakers, but they've got SPDs in them, right? So I drove over here in these because I didn't want to carry a third pair of shoes. So for most people, you're not going to see a ton of difference from one to the other. You get a little bit less flex on your foot if you have the bigger cleat, like it distributes the force a little bit more. So if you have aching arches when you're riding and you're using the smaller cleats, you might want to try the bigger cleats. But they're not necessarily going to make you go like super fast compared to the smaller cleats or anything, right? It does make you look more stylish when you're wearing the road cleats, like I know what I'm doing. That's a concern. But I don't know, I'm really tempted to like stop using the road cleats and just go to the SPDs all the time because it's so convenient just to be able to walk around in shoes. So other things we got to be concerned. You always want to have some kind of eye protection. So most of the time you're wearing sunglasses, but sometimes we start and it's dark out, or it's overcast and it's not very bright. I have a pair of clear lenses that I will take on those days. You can also get glasses where you can swap out the lenses, but it's always good to have something covering your eyes to protect you from road debris or the big bugs that we sometimes run into. Raise your hand if you've eaten a bug on a bicycle ride. So if you eat them, you can also get them in your face or in your eyes, right? Heart rate monitors are good, especially if you're a newer rider. When it gets hot out, if your heart rate goes up higher than typical for a given exertion level, that's one of the signs of like heat exhaustion or heat stress. So it's a good thing to pay attention to, as well as like helping you plan your workouts and things. If you haven't seen them, we've got these fancy St. Arnold's gloves that I think you can still purchase, right? Maybe. If not now, again in the future, I'm sure. But you want some kind of gloves typically, or some nice cushy padding on your handlebars. I actually got to the point where I don't wear my gloves unless it's chilly, but a lot of people like to do both for comfort. If it's dark out again, and it's good to have some kind of light on your bicycle. A white one on the front and a red one on the back. Technically, per state law, you cannot have a flashing white light on the front of a vehicle unless you have a non-strobing light as well. But I don't think anybody's ever got a ticket for a flashing white light on a bicycle. So I know.
Say that again, sorry, no flashing in front technically?
Why? You cannot have a flashing light in front unless you also have a non-flashing light.
So you have to have two lights. Why?
So you have to have two if your front light is flashing. Technically. The back, you can do whatever you want.
There's no flashing when you have to work that.
Yes. The other thing about gear is you can choose to only ride when it's nice out for training, right?
I've done that, it sucks.
Yeah. When it comes to EMS 150, the weather is safe enough to do the ride and host people in LaGrange, we will roll.
And drink beer.
And drink, well, we can drink beer and not ride too. So it can be quite chilly. It can be fairly wet. It's not going to be a torrential downpour because that would not be safe. It can be very windy. So you need to have gear in your kit to wear for a variety of conditions. It can also be very hot. So if it's hot out, there are, you want to have lots of fluids, but you can we have these like arm cooling sleeves. I haven't actually tried mine out yet. I bought them, and when it gets really hot, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But I have used, they have these little like head sweat things. They're helpful, right? You can pour cold water on them. They also help keep the sweat from dripping in your eyes, which is really annoying. We have cycling caps that fit underneath helmets. So you want to have stuff for hot weather, and then you want stuff for cold and rainy weather. You get your, I just use like cold weather gloves when it's cold out. They're not necessarily cycling specific, but you want something that covers your whole hand. And then if your feet get cold, these are really good. They're just like, they go over your shoe and they cover your toes, keep your toes a little bit warmer. These are like really cold weather covers. I don't know that you would have much use for these unless you just really
That's a kitty. You can also put a plastic bag.
Put plastic bag over your socks then?
Over your sock and your shoe.
So for anyone who rode a few years ago, like Noble gave these out as part of the MS package. But they're really great for when it's cold out. And you can use them to cover your ears. They're really thin, so they still feel like your helmet, right? You kind of do like that, still put your helmet on, right? You can put like a full knit cap on or whatever, but when you do that, you just got to readjust your helmet, right? It takes up so much space. And these are easy to put in your pocket when it's warm. A lot of times it's cold in the beginning, and then it gets warm, right? And then again, we've got arm warmers for when it's cold. You got sleeves for when it's hot, and then like arm warmers for when it's cold. They all are good because you can put them in your pocket real quick. You want some kind of waterproof jacket. This one's a cycling specific one. It's kind of nifty because you can shove the whole thing through a pocket. Yeah, it's kind of like a magic trick. So it goes into this pocket, and then you can like strap it around your waist. But you can just get like a regular windbreaker and throw it in your pocket too, right? It just saves you a little one less thing you got to put in your pocket. And then in addition to arm warmers, you can also get leg warmers. I don't hardly ever use these, to be honest, but I have them. One other thing, like if you're riding and when it's not very well lit, like we gave out these for the MS 150 a couple of years ago from Saddle. Now they're a different company. Same company, different name. But you can slap around your wrist, right? 80s technology, reuse, repurpose, right? You can also put them around your ankles, so it just adds to your visibility. They're reflective, so that's pretty neat. Any questions on gear?
The only thing I read a while back about gloves is one of the main reasons for wearing them, if you ever fall off the bike and land on your hand cuts are almost impossible to heal. It's one thing to keep from cutting your hands.
That is a very good point. If you have gloves on and you fall, then if you put your hands down during a fall, it'll help protect your hands from a fall. That is true. I've gashed my hands pretty good from falling before. The other thing that goes with that, like I've got my 2 rings on right now. I take them off before every ride because if you fall and you're sliding on pavement and you hit a crack or something, like it's going to jerk your finger and that can be really bad. Any other questions on gear? Anything anyone really loves that I didn't mention? You can get cameras for when you have accidents and it'll take a picture of it. What do you got?
Yeah, you can also have those monitors that tell you car information.
Yep.
So you can get it very right there.
Oh yeah, so you can get a rear view mirror. There's 2 kinds. There's one that like will attach to your helmet, and so it kind of sticks out like right in front of you, like right here. And I tried one of those, and like for me, it was too close to my face to focus. It just annoyed the crap out of me. So then I tried you can put them on your handlebars, and that was great for about a month. And then I went to get on my bike and it went flying about 10 yards. So I was like, all right, well, I tried it.
Football and video glasses.
Yep.
Yeah. Really helpful to notice someone fighting on you, or you're gonna come out around with someone and see if you're gonna cross them. Or cars.
So I carry these, like this is really kind of a total optional thing. It's a piece of water bottle I cut up. But a lot of times when people have problems with flats, or fairly often, you know, they've got like a critically damaged tire itself, right? Like you can put another tube in there, but it's just gonna like burst through. And if you have something like this, you use it as like a boot to reinforce the tire itself so that the tube doesn't screw through. But you can also use that dollar bill if you've got $1 in your pocket, or if you have an old goo wrapper, or flip bar wrapper, anything that's like somewhat flexible but stiff. You can put that in there in between the tube and the tire to keep the tube from extruding, and at least get you like on a group ride to the next rest stop where you can buy a tube.
Someone told us to cut up one of our old tires.
Yep, you can do that too.
So we kind of cut up and cut a couple of them so that when the tire goes bad, we can put that on the inside of the tire and use that.
No, she was saying that you could also cut up an old tire to use as a boot. Yep. You go to the bike shop, they will sell you an official like tire boot for like $10 or something. They have like, you know, self-adhesive. You take the adhesive off and you stick it on there, right? And it stays in place.
Everybody has duct tape.
Yeah, duct tape. Oh.
Duct tape. Hold it in on itself and make yourself move that.
Speaking of duct tape, you can buy this little to-go package of duct tape. Like $4 on Amazon or something.
If you want duct tape, you can just wrap a little bit around your handlebars.
You buy a whole roll for $2.
Yeah, but a whole roll is bulky in your pocket, right?
The bus motor wrap.
Alright, so once you have your bike chosen, you're going to ride all your rides with, you want to make sure you take care of it. It should be washed fairly regularly, not necessarily every ride, but if you're riding and it's wet out, you're going to collect lots of dirt. You should wash it after a wet ride or a ride on wet ground. The more dirt and stuff collects on your chain, the faster your chain wears out, the faster your cassette wears out, the faster your front gears wear out. So it's just good to keep the bike clean. If you take care of it reasonably well, you know, plus or minus 2,000 miles, your chain should last. There are tools to measure, like as your chain ages, it will stretch out, and the more it stretches out, the faster it wears the gears it's running on. So you want to replace it before it gets too old or too stretched out, right? So there are tools to measure how stretched out that chain is, and they'll tell you when to replace it. Or you go to your bike shop and they can tell you. You got to keep track of your mileage, so figure it out that way too. You want to make sure that everything that rotates on your bike stays lubricated, stays clean. You got derailleurs, condense pedals. You need to make sure your brakes are always adjusted properly to where you have good braking force. If you can squeeze the lever all the way down and it just barely gets tight, then you got a problem. You want to make sure that you keep the lube off your brakes, right? And for anything you don't know how to do yourself, like make sure you go ahead and get it done. Go to your local bike shop and get the maintenance done that you need to get done that way if you can't do it yourself. The MS Society has a few rules as far as like what you're allowed to, or what you're prohibited from using during a ride. And these are all safety related, right? So headphones and earbuds, they limit your ability to hear what other riders are trying to tell you, and they limit your awareness of your surroundings, which both increase your likelihood of getting into an accident. So that's why those are forbidden. Mobile phones, certainly allowed to carry them, just don't pull your phone out and start typing on it and calling somebody while you're riding a bicycle. Same thing with a car, right? You're a distracted driver at that point, and you have one less hand available. Handheld cameras, like it's perfectly fine if you have one on your handlebars, like mounted there and stationary. It's fast. You don't same thing, take one out and take pictures.
It's very nice, qualifies as sound device.
The very qualifies.
Oh, he might. You know, it might detect that. So on the MS-150, they don't allow trailers or tag-along cycles. So a tag-along, for anyone doesn't know, it's kind of like a trailer. It's a third wheel that you attach to typically your seat post to carry an additional passenger. And the MS Society doesn't allow that. I guess there's been some issues with those. But, I use one of my kids in the neighborhood. There's nothing necessarily wrong with them. Not allowed in the MS-150. They also don't allow rollerblades or skaters anymore. We used to have those in the ride a long time back. Any questions on any of that? Aaron?
So non-personal sound device, is that just like speakers that you put in your water bottle case or something like that?
Yeah, so you can have a speaker. The idea behind note number 3 is that speaker should be for you, not for people 50 yards down the road.
Someone should know that they're head writing sometimes you have those
Alright, so we're talking a little bit about helmet fit. So when I took one of these classes, this is the first time I was like, hey, you know what? I had no idea how to wear a helmet right. So no shame if this is new to you. So you want to make sure that the helmet is snug on your head from front to back, right? So you can test that by you got a strap back here, or an adjustment, typically in the back. It makes it bigger or smaller, right? And so I want that to be snug enough that if I bend forward with just that adjustment, that the helmet is tight enough it stays in place, right? And the whole idea behind adjusting your helmet is you want it to stay where it needs to be to protect the right parts of your head, right? Because if your helmet ends up back here during an accident, then you have all this important stuff exposed, right, that you want to protect. So that's the first part. And then the second part you can see on the video or on the picture here. You want this strap that eventually comes to your chin, but you want it to be just below your ear. A lot of times you see this adjustment is really low, like down here perhaps, right? And the reason you want it further up on your ear is because the higher up it is, the better it's able to keep that helmet from rotating from front to back, right? And then the last thing you want to check on your helmet is how much space is underneath your chin, right? Mine's actually probably a little bit loose right now, but if you can fit more than like 2 fingers underneath your chin, then it's too loose. And usually I try and get a little bit higher than that. It doesn't need to be uncomfortable, but it should be snug all around, right? Other things to watch out for. Occasionally you will see the right way. And if you're accessorizing again, like a riding cap is okay, like a regular ball cap is hard to get it properly fitted, but you just want to make sure that you readjust everything so that it fits properly both with the accessory, and then when you take it off, make sure you adjust it again because now it's going to be loose, right? Because I made it bigger than the ball cap. Any questions?
Is it just the helmet manufacturers that recommend getting a new one every several years, or why would you need to get a new one other than just replacing some of the padding inside? I've always been confused.
So they have like a born-on date, and the manufacturers guarantee them for, I believe it's 5 years after they're manufactured.
The UV rays will
Well, the UV rays will deteriorate on any plastic, right? The salt from your sweat will cause them to deteriorate. Some of it's just this is what we test them to kind of thing. There's also the have the helmets been damaged in some way, I just don't notice it factor, right? So I would follow the manufacturer's recommendations. It's not like super onerous, but if you were to use a helmet a year past its expiration date, is it still going to work pretty well? Probably. That said, anytime you get into an accident, whether you think you hit your helmet on something or not, you should get it replaced. Because even though there's no or not very much visible damage on the outside of the helmet, you may have absorbed some of the energy absorbing potential inside the helmet already. That make sense?
Good.
And then as far as what helmet to buy, they're all, any helmet on the market in the United States has to be qualified to a particular standard. And then there's all sorts of other things that they advertise and claim. But they try to decide between one helmet and the next, like which one's safer. There's not really good data on that.
There is for Virginia Tech. They do help, like, third-party helmet testing. They got specific bicycle one, you can look there. Most of them are all good now, but there are better ones. And so if you're between two, that's a good source.
But like there's something called MIPS, which you may have heard of, which is a really good technology and a really good I guess thing to know about, or an interesting thing to know about, I guess, at this point. And it comes down to the fact that like concussions, there's a lot of data that suggests that a lot of the reason you get a concussion is because of rotational impacts. So like if your body's rotating and it comes to a sudden rest, it causes like your brain to, your brain was rotating and it stops rotating, and that's part of what causes the concussion. And so some manufacturers have things called MIPS in them, which is like an extra layer to absorb rotational impacts, right? And so, okay, great, I should get a MIPS helmet. Well, maybe not, because one helmet with MIPS may not be any better at protecting against rotation than a different helmet without MIPS. If that makes sense.
And I can speak to that because I treat concussion. Okay. Your helmet is not going to prevent a concussion, but you need to still make sure you have a good helmet. You're protecting your skull, really. But don't count on a helmet to quote unquote prevent concussion, because it can still happen. You're just trying to make sure you're as safe as you can be out there.
Hey, a lot of companies also moving away from this, making their own rotational technology because they're paying like a fee for the mix. So some helmets may have that rotational tech to prevent getting things more, but it may be called something else because they're not paying.
There's other things out there with names, but right now, from what I've read, like, not many people are advertising. There's not like a number or anything that they advertise on a particular helmet. You can't go to the store and go, okay, this one's a 90, this one's an 85, or anything like that. You know, you can go look at the Virginia Tech data, see what they have to say, but unfortunately, there's not like a official great source on that stuff. So a lot of it comes down to comfort. You pay more for more ventilation typically, right? If you get a really cheap helmet, it typically doesn't have very many slits in it, but it may be, you know, as safe or safer than a more expensive helmet. You also pay for like ease of adjustment on the back, the front, and the sides and everything. This one has like a magnetic clasp, right, instead of a snap. Yeah. It's a bond tracker, yeah. My daughter got one and it had the magnetic thing, and I was like, I got it. Alright, so once you got your bike and all your gear and you're getting ready to go for a ride, the league always recommends every time you get on the bike you do an ABC quick check, right? And just a quick test to make sure that your bike is ready to go and you're not going to have any issues like, you know, the first 100, 200 feet or anything, or maybe a little further down the line. So A is really easy, it stands for air. We always got to have air in our tires, right? So you can give them a quick squeeze, and I haven't aired these up yet today, so I can push them down pretty far. And if I feel that, and I know what I'm doing, I can say, okay, hey, that air is kind of low, right? Like, why is that low? Well, because I haven't aired them up yet. But if I was coming from a rest stop, and the air was a little bit low, it might prompt me to think, oh, hey, did I pick up a thorn on my tire somewhere? Do I have a piece of glass that I picked up on the road somewhere that's causing a slow leak, right? And you catch that before you go get on the ride and get away from the rest stop. Does that make sense? So the second thing you always want to check is your brakes. Alright? You want 2 brakes you can push down and they stop before they hit your handlebars. If you get all the way down to here and there's like no resistance, then your brakes aren't adjusted properly, right? And that could be if you've changed the flat. You have these releases for your tires, your wheels. And so when you're changing a flat, you open them up, right? And so now when I open that up, it becomes a lot further than it did before, right? And either it does it pretty tight so it doesn't go as far. But my back was not as tight. I open that one up. Now I can get this lever down like past the handlebar almost, right? So that's one thing to check for. You can also hold both brakes. With the bike on the ground, you should be able to like rock it back and forth like this because the wheels aren't spinning, right? That's a good test. And you always want to make sure that your crank is turning your wheels, right? When all 30 of us from St. Arnold are getting ready to go, if you clip in and you turn your crank and the wheel doesn't move, what's going to happen? You get left behind, right? Nobody wants that. Any questions on that?
Not necessarily a question, but you could be checking if the brake pad is rubbing against the tire, because if it's rubbing before the ride, then you're not going to have to.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when your tire is spinning freely and you're not pushing the brakes, there should not be any rubbing in the pad against the wheel, right? If you do, like, if you stop at a rest stop, sometimes these can get pushed over a little bit. And the easiest way to fix that is just to rotate the wheel and hit the brakes really hard, and it should still spinner, right? If it's not really dirty. That make sense?
Yeah, something that happened to me was it was making noise when I was braking, and I did all the adjustments and everything. The noise still persisted, and I noticed that there was still some scratching happening on the wheel itself, and so I was like, all right, this is going to be out of my league. And we took it apart in the shop, and we saw that I'd gotten some metallic gunk in my brake pads, and it was scratching the wheel, and so they were done. I mean, we had to replace it, but they're not supposed to make any noise, right? I mean, that's typically noise even in your body, right? It's bad, right? So that's one thing to watch out for. Like, it caught me off guard, but I just kept on riding with it, and I should have changed them.
Yeah. And sometimes if the pads aren't even with the wheel, if you have the caliper brakes like those, they'll make this horrendous screeching noise as you brake, because like the pad's kind of like fluttering because of the position it's in. So that you want to avoid that if you can. Any other questions? Oh, almost forgot. The last thing you always want, it's good to do is to do a little quick rock test. Make sure there's nothing that sounds horrendous, right? If you have something loose, doesn't sound good, does it? So you can catch that. Over time, your water bottle cages, anything else that's held together with a screw, they can get kind of loose, and you'll catch that with that before it like falls off in the middle of the road. But that's another good test to do on your bike.
it's not like Jeep, and I think that's a whole I was thinking about. And I inadvertently like unloosed the cage for the wheel. So, but I think I'll take it home and I'll bring it to the garage. It's weird, that loosened it, but you gotta think about it, I was going into a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you,
That was getting checked, like, just before you get in the ride, you know, especially because you're taking it out of your truck, or your car, and stuff like that. Not a person who can get caught.
when you're putting the wheels on, something else to think about is, what position is this quick release ankle at, right? Like if it's pointing this way, right? And I run up, if I do something stupid and I overlap wheels with somebody, their wheel could come in here and do that, right? So it's better to have that front one. I always like to put it up straight up towards my frame. But if you want to do it back, like straight back, that's relatively reasonable, a reasonable thing to do. You just want to be smart about how you position those. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to ride on the road with traffic. It's kind of some of the least sport stuff. So bicycles should always be followed. We always want to follow the law, right? Nobody wants to ticket, especially Waller. Well, you're more likely to with Waller, but you don't want to ticket anywhere. We want to be predictable, and we want to be conspicuous because these are things that are going to help us avoid accidents, right? Sometimes it's working and sometimes not. There we go. So as far as following the law, you get the same rights and duties as a motorcyclist. So under state law, a bicyclist has to follow all the same laws as any other motor vehicle, right? As far as stopping at stop signs, stop lights, turning from the proper lanes, those kind of things. There are additional limitations and requirements on us as cyclists. They're different than other motorized vehicles, but we do have the same rights and responsibilities. One of the key things that comes with that is we always want to be riding with traffic and using the rightmost lane that serves our purpose, because we're almost always going to be the slowest moving vehicle on the road, especially in comparison to cars and trucks, right? Sometimes we are faster than other cyclists, depending on how fast we are and how slow the other cyclists are. But compared to cars and trucks, we're going to be slower. So things to think about to be predictable, and we want to be predictable because we want people who are in cars and trucks to anticipate where we are going correctly, right? If a car is going somewhere to avoid us, that should not be the place that we're going. That makes sense, right? So that's what a lot of this is predicated on. So ride in a straight line when we can. You don't swerve back and forth between parked cars. We always want to signal our intentions and check where we're going before we go there. Not any different than you would in a regular car race. Yep.
In some instances, there'll be 3 lanes, and the third lane is the turning lane. You're going straight. Should we be in the turning lane, or should we be on the left edge of the turning lane?
So you're saying like the far right lane?
And there's a turn lane on the right hand.
Yeah, we're going straight. Should we stay under the turning lane?
So I think I have a picture of this exact scenario in like 5 slides.
Okay.
You want to hold your question? If we don't cover it in a couple of slides, let me know.
Okay.
All right. All right. So being conspicuous, like we all want to be seen, right? Because it's most people aren't going to run us over on purpose. It's when people don't see you, don't anticipate where you're going when accidents happen, right? So that's why we always have this like nicely colored lycra clothing. why we use lights if we're riding at night, and reflectors. Also making eye contact, like when you're trying to change lanes and things, you know. You look behind you, you look at the person who's coming up, and a lot of times that'll give you the space you need. And typically, you're not supposed to ride on sidewalks. In the city of Houston, it's not legal to ride on sidewalks. It's generally not recommended by the league to ride on sidewalks unless you're going at a slow pace. It all goes back to that anticipating where you're going to be. If I'm driving a car, I'm not expecting somebody to go 20 miles an hour off the sidewalk. I'm looking for people that are walking, right? We also want to think ahead when we're riding. Change our lanes early. Anticipate what other folks that are using our space are going to do. Watch for turning vehicles and the door zone when you're passing parked cars. You always got to be cognizant that one of those doors can open at any point in time. Like somebody may have just parked, or they might. I mean, nowadays people sit there and they finish their phone call for 10, 15 minutes in their car. So even if they've been there a while, they might open their door at any minute. And then of course, looking for potholes and debris, road hazards, calling those out, and railroad tracks, which we'll talk about in detail a little bit.
Very focused next.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't get a constant state of scanning our surroundings when we're riding. Particularly when we're going to deviate from going in a straight line, we want to scan to make sure that the space that we're going to take over is safe. We always want to be looking around in different directions to observe traffic coming in different directions and what hazards might be out there. So signaling, we all learned this in like driver's ed a long time ago for some of us. Most of these are fairly intuitive, left turn is intuitive, right? I think right turn is intuitive, this one's. Stopping, a lot of people might have forgotten, but I think if you're driving a car and you don't ride bicycles, and you see somebody doing this, you're like, are they stopping? Stopping's got to be on their radar if they might be doing this, right? But for right turn, like I don't know how many people that haven't taken a class recently remember this being right turn. Unless you drove cars in like the 50s or 60s when we didn't have turn signals, right? So for me, I recommend always using this for right turns, because if I point at something, it's relatively intuitive what I'm trying to convey, right? There are a few folks out there that say, don't ever point with your right hand, because now you don't have your right hand available to press your brakes. And if you only press your left brakes, what happens? It's your front brake, right? You're more likely to flip over. So keep that in mind, but my recommendation is point with the right hand and just be ready to cover that brake. That make sense? Sure.
Middle finger.
Middle finger. So we're going to a little bit more detail on traffic law and lane positioning. If anybody needs a refill on beverages, feel free at any time. What's that?
Do you need a beverage?
I would not turn one down. I'm drinking Harmony.
Once you're done, let me know. I'll get you.
All right. So where on the road should we ride? To the right, the left, in the middle?
Right.
Depends. What? On the feeder, yeah. So if you're paying attention earlier, we said we should ride as far to the right as is practicable, I believe. Maybe that's later. But as far as like each individual lane, it depends on the individual circumstances. Unfortunately, it's not like a one. So there's different things you might consider when you decide where you're going to position yourself on the road. So how fast are you going? How fast are other other folks that are using this area going? Are you changing lanes? That changes the answer, right? Or you're gonna make a turn? Are you coming up to an intersection? So all those things factor into where on the road you need to be. All right. All right, so we do have the right to use the whole road, depending on our circumstances, right? Like we have the same rights and responsibilities as any other motor vehicle. So whatever space we need to operate safely, we're entitled to that, even if sometimes cars and trucks don't think they want it, right? You gotta have that confidence.
Can you ride in pairs?
So can you ride in pairs? You mean parallel, side by side?
Yes.
So the state of Texas has a law on that, which is another slide, but I'll go ahead and address it now since you asked. You are allowed to ride two abreast, provided you do not impede the normal flow of traffic. Right? So if it's a one-lane road and there's enough room for a car to pass a single cyclist, but not two cyclists, then you are required to ride single file. If it's a one-lane road where there is not enough room for a car to pass a single cyclist safely, then we can do what we call taking the lane, right? And technically, you could ride two abreast in that circumstance, right? But what do the folks driving a truck think when you're riding two abreast and you won't let them pass, and they think there's enough room for you to get by, but you don't think there's enough room for you to get by? Like there's this discrepancy between what you're communicating, right? Like if you're riding single file and you're taking the lane, it's very clear to anybody that's trying to pass you in a car or truck that you're taking that lane for a purpose that's not so I can ride next to somebody else. Does that make sense? Aaron?
What if it's a two-lane? Could you take over the whole right lane? Let's say you go two abreast. As long as cars can go past you on their left lane, that should be okay, right?
So I'm not a lawyer. Right? So don't take anything I say on this to heart. So my best recollection, the law says you may not impede the normal flow of traffic, right? So if riding two abreast reduces the amount of other vehicular traffic that can go by, then to me you would not be meeting the requirements of that law. But from a practical standpoint, like if traffic is light, are you really impeding them if they can still get by just as fast as a clip in that other lane? Maybe not.
Thank you.
Short laws, MP equals MP, they're a lot bigger than we are.
Yeah. And if nobody's there to complain about it, you know.
Well, I mean, the truck drivers are always going to complain.
Well, like if there's nobody on the road, is what I was saying, you know. Like sometimes you ride out early in the morning, you're on a two-lane road, there's like hardly any traffic, and there's two lanes, like.
I think that will be
All right, so again, slower moving vehicles to the right. I was gesturing and I answered charges. So as cyclists, we're typically the slower vehicles, we want to be on the right. And when we do pass people, we pass on the left, right? On the MS 150, is everybody going to pass on your left? No. There's a lot of people who don't take these classes, they don't do group rides. They just come out and they get on the bike and they go and they don't care what anyone else thinks. But for the most part, we should be doing that. When we're changing lanes, we want to check for traffic coming before we change our lanes. We look, we signal, we want to look again, We don't go until it's clear. You yield to the traffic, and you want to go smoothly.
Watch the cracks.
Watch the cracks.
Watch the cracks when you're changing lanes.
So when you're coming up to an intersection, like we position ourselves at the intersections according to where we're going. So it's often convenient to think of lanes being divided into three. So you can see that there's three different positions in this lane, right? The lane is allowed to go left, right, or straight, and we indicate where we're going based on our positioning. And it's not only just for signaling. If this lane is wide enough to share with a car or truck, putting yourself in the correct position is also, it's a safety thing, because if I'm in the right position and I'm going straight, or even worse, going left, and there's a car that wants to turn right, they might try and come up next to me and turn right in front of me, right? And that could be disastrous. So by being in the center or left position, I'm preventing them from getting on my left and coming around me. Does that make sense?
And sometimes they kind of pass you and they get in front of you. So what I do, I either let them go first, but I gotta tell the other guy that I'm going straight. So I typically look at them and tell them, like, I'm going straight. It's not one of the signals that you had up there, but I tell them, hey, I'm going straight.
Yeah. So again, we always want to be in a lane that corresponds to our destination, right? So here we were starting on the right side of the road. The lane we were in is going to become a right-hand turn lane. We're not going to turn right, so we need to get over to the left. The rightmost lane is going to go straight. Does that make sense? And you got a nice visual why we don't want to ride in the right-hand lane in this position, because if we're right here going straight, that car is going to turn into us, right?
I think prior to where that bike is right now.
Take away.
As soon as you know that's a lane,
Take away.
you gotta move over.
Yeah, the graphic is, you should be doing that as early as possible, right? And we got a note here, right? If you're ever in a situation where like you're uncomfortable following the right lanes to correspond to your destination, you got a really busy intersection or whatever, you always have the opportunity to get off your bike and walk an intersection as a pedestrian, right?
Take the right. Take the right.
Yeah, that's true. You can take a right, then you turn, come back. So when you're waiting at red lights, the league does not recommend that you squeeze up to the front of the road. If you're in a lane that's wide enough, substantially wide enough for a bicycle and a car, that's one thing. But if you're on a narrow lane where you would not want a car to pass you while you're riding, you don't want to take that little bit of space that you have and go up to the front of the light and share the lane at the stoplight, because now you're setting yourself up to share that lane once you start moving again, right? And how are you going to take that back? The same thing is just wait where you're at, in the line, and take your time, right?
I think it's better.
Yeah. Like sometimes a long click works, but then sometimes the long click does like 3. Let's hit the button. Alright, so here we have one straight lane, and then the lane is either a right turn lane or a straight lane. And again, you want to position yourself to the right if you're going to turn right, and to the left or the center if you're going to go straight, right? The same reason is that you have 3 options, right? The main thing here is we're not going to make use of this going to the left because we're the slower moving vehicle, right? Leave that available for the cars and trucks. Any questions? I feel like this is redundant. Don't we do this one?
Yeah, just cover that.
So we have multiple left-hand turn lanes. Again, you want to be in the rightmost lane that goes where you're wanting to go. So we're in the right lane, not the left lane. And that's pretty simple, right? So if you're on a one-way street, turning on the one-way street, so you have to get to the left lane to turn left. But if you're going straight, you can stay in the right lane. And again, you're going to position yourself in this lane depending on how wide that lane is, right? If you're riding to the right, that would indicate that there's room to share. But if there's not room to share that lane, then you would ride in the center, right? So here we go, the excerpt from the Texas laws, as close to the curb as is practicable. Right? They lost Aaron. So again, the principle is slower traffic should be riding to the right, and you can ride two abreast, but you cannot impede the normal and reasonable flow of traffic. So any questions on riding two abreast? And we talked about it a little bit earlier. And when it comes to the MS 150, for anyone who hasn't done a big group ride, it's not going to be two abreast. It's going to be 3, 4, 5 abreast. Like it's going to be crowded.
Or better yet, the team that goes by you that doesn't tell you they're coming up against you.
Yeah. So something to think about in your lane positioning decisions. It's generally recommended by most cycling organizations, including the League of American Bicyclists, that a safe distance between a cyclist and a vehicle and a cyclist to the curb or ditch or whatever the edge of the road is 3 feet on both sides.
Just remember they're on bike riders here who are new to the team, so.
Can
So-
you repeat that?
Sorry.
So if you're not quiet, he won't serve you any more beer. So when you're trying to judge if a lane is big enough to share a car with, you got to think of, well, is there 6 feet for me and then enough room for an F-350 dually, right? It's not just the Toyota Prius, right? It's the bigger cars. And then if you're taking the lane and the smaller vehicle approaches you and they're kind of stuck, you can always come over, let the smaller vehicle pass and take it back. Now, if there's a giant vehicle behind them, you're kind of in a tough situation, but in cases you can let the smaller vehicles go. So again, you got enough room to share, and then down here, when you make the decision to take the lane, you're riding in the center, and then the cars have to cross the dotted line to pass you. All right? And any questions on any of the traffic scenarios we talked about, or ones we didn't talk about? Nope. All right. We're going to talk about non-traffic obstacles that we might see on the MS 150 or training ride. Well, in talking and writing in a group in general. So there are hazards, and none of us want our friends to get hurt, so we always yell out those hazards when you see them, right? So we want to communicate as much as we can when we're on group rides. So telling people where you're at is important. I'm on your left, or if for some reason you're on somebody's right, you can say on your right. Better to tell them than to be there without advertising it. any kind of hazard you see on the road, pole, bump, debris, gravel, slick spots, water. What else do we see? Railroad tracks. We're gonna talk about that. Cracks, grates. There's a lot of them. So you want to communicate the positions of cars that we see that could affect us. So car back, car up, car left or car right at intersections. And then again, communicate what are we doing, slowing or stopping. That's a big one. Is that a stretch?
No, it's a stretch.
I thought it was a stretch. They're dogs. What happened?
Oh my God.
There is no great answer on dogs, but don't ride with Aaron because he's going to be the one way out in front. You're going to be the one that's going to be got by the dog.
You just have to have a water bottle, squeeze the water out of it.
Jeff, you have a good idea on dogs? How the water bottle? Yeah, so Jeff was saying you can squirt your water at them before they get that close. If you yell a command at them, sometimes it will make them pause just long enough for you to have the distance you need to get away. Oftentimes they will stop at like their territory, right? So if they have a yard, while you're riding in front of that yard, they're going to chase you. Once you get to the edge of it, oftentimes they'll stop. So that's something to be aware of.
Is this where you do your interval training?
Yes. If you feel really threatened by an animal and you're not going very fast or you need to get off the bike, you can use the bike as kind of like a barrier to the dog. But in my personal opinion, like I think you're better off just to keep going because, like again, if you get out of their territory, they'll leave you alone typically. And if you're fast enough, you can outrun them.
Some wild dogs.
Stay on the dog.
Some wild dogs can be breathless.
Yeah. So wind blasts. Sometimes it's breezy, you know, and just out of nowhere, a big blast of wind will come. It's very gusty. So you need to make sure you have two hands in the handlebars in those situations and ready to adjust for that. It can cause people to kind of do this, weave back and forth as the wind hits them. And it's not just weather dependent. The other thing that causes wind gusts, big trucks. You know, 18-wheelers, if they're in the lane next to you, as they go by, it creates this vacuum effect. And so after the 18-wheeler passes you, it's going to try and pull you into the lane behind them, so you need to be ready for that. Right? So grates, as well as like railroad tracks, things that could cause us to slip into a rut. We want to try and cross those at 90 degrees or close to 90 degrees. You don't want to be anything close to like parallel to an obstacle like that, because then your wheel can get stuck in something, and once your front wheel gets stuck, you're gonna end over or fall down.
Please call out cracks.
Yes. And if you're at the lead of a group, if you can avoid crossing a big crack, that's helpful as well.
And also in communication in general, that's the time to use your outside voice when you're with a large group or it's windy. When it's windy, you can't hardly hear even like people that are like maybe one or two bikers.
Unless it's Miramax.
Unless what?
It's Miramax.
Yeah, correct. Or if someone's got their personal audio device, like you need to yell loud enough in commands so that people are aware. And then it's like a telephone, right? Like you need to continue to command so that the person all the way in the back of the group is aware of what's happening.
That's also true if the person is saying the first command, you acknowledge that you heard what they said. So that's sort of like echo and bounce back.
And your reaction time needs to be kind of quick because anything can happen on the bike. I've ridden with a couple of people last year that we had to have a little conversation about communication safety. And so, is this being recorded? This will be uploaded later. Okay, perfect.
That very movie guy is really hard to ride with.
As a newer rider to the group, yelling and gesture, if I can see the gesture, if I can't hear what's going on, I can point, and then I can see everybody veering. pointing is very valuable, even if you cannot point.
Yeah, she brings up a good point, especially if you're in the front. So I've got a very loud voice in case you haven't noticed. What? No, but I will point at something. So if you see like a casual, like, hey, look at this. Now, if you see a very direct, that means, hey, that's really bad. So everyone in the front needs to communicate with people in the back as the line progresses. So yeah, as Jennifer was saying earlier, some people in the front don't have a very outdoory voice. So if you just say something, they may not hear you, but if they see you point, then they're like, oh, I need to pay attention to wherever that is. Right. And just keep everyone behind you safe so we can all get back in trade here. And make my life easier. Yes. Second.
I can really change the way the message is perceived on the other end. If you're yelling at someone, there's a tone of anger, and if you're being loud, like it's care, and that matters.
It also depends on whenever you're pulling and trying to breathe and so doing the pointing when you're pulling is easier. So if you can't hear it, that's fine. So you're behind the second one, third, you see the hand gesture, and you're the one saying, hey, crack right or pull right. So don't let the whole responsibility be in the person pulling because they're out of it.
Yeah.
So if you're second and third, be watching, and once you see it, hey guys, pull right, so everybody can see it.
Or if you hear the person in front of you say something, again, people behind you may not hear it. Just point. Point is the best cue, but again, try to say something as well because they don't know what to look for.
I never know what to say fast enough. Somebody said you have to say something really quick, and I can never come up with the right words, so I just always say bump.
Bump is good.
As long as you say
Bump
something.
or crack, yeah. Choose one.
Yeah, so usually you'll probably be a little out of breath. Well, I guess it depends. But usually it's just one syllable type of thing. So bump, crack, hole. Hole's a great one.
Also, so everybody watches out for holes.
Yeah. So saying y'all be very careful of the crack, that's not going to come out very well. Or you should be pulling more if you can do that.
So, other things to look out for. Anytime we're riding over anything that's metal, particularly like in the early morning, there's a little bit of dew on it. It's very slippery. Paint, especially fresh paint, can be very slippery.
Train tracks.
Train tracks. We got a whole slide on train tracks in a minute. Uneven road surfaces. So when they come in and they repave one lane but not the other, or not the shoulder, you got like this 1 or 2 inch like deviation in elevation right there, and people have fallen from those quite often. Right? It's almost as bad as a crack, or maybe worse because it's harder to see sometimes.
The uneven road.
The cracks. You can't say enough about cracks and seams, right? Those are really good things to hurt people on. So when we're riding in groups, we don't want to do this, right? We don't want the front wheel to be in front of the back wheel. Okay? And it's not obvious why that is. If somebody in front of you clips your front wheel, what happens? You turn, right? And very quickly you fall down. We'll talk about this on some of the on-bike exercises, but chain was falling off. Your back wheel, if something hits it, nothing happens, right? Generally. It's not going to change your direction, things hitting your back wheel, but your front wheel, you know, you got all the controls up there, so you don't want anything to happen to your front wheel.
Yeah, if you look to the left or the right and you see another wheel, that's a bad thing. You're doing something very wrong.
So you always want to get your space. You know, when we're drafting, the closer you get drafting-wise, the better efficiency you get, or the more savings you get. But we'll talk more about that later on. You want to make sure that you're comfortable with the people you're riding with, that nothing's gonna happen when you're ever gonna end up in that scenario, right? So the less you know that person, the more deviation in their speed there is, the more space you wanna leave to make sure you don't overlap.
Reverse.
Alright, so intersections. We want to be helpful to our other riders, and so we want to let them know what we're doing, but we don't want to take it upon ourselves to tell them what to do in case something bad happens, right? So we always recommend it to use rolling to communicate what I'm doing. I am rolling through this intersection, right? I am not going to take it upon myself to tell you that it's safe for you to cross, because it might not be. Maybe it's safe for me to cross, but by the time you get there, it may not be, right? So those other words that people use are not recommended, right?
Don't use the word clear.
And regardless of what anybody else says, you gotta use this, right? Like, make your own decisions. You need to look and make sure it's clear for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yep. And if you're leading a big group of people, you should make sure there's enough room in your own judgment for the whole group, right? If there's just enough room for you and you alone to go, then wait. Because
enough time.
Even if you say rolling, or you say car right, and don't say anything else, and you just go, the natural reaction of the 20 people behind you is like, oh my God, I don't want to get dropped, I'm going to go, right? So if you're that lead guy, like, try and keep the group together and don't get anybody like caught in an intersection under a tire. Yep.
I feel like it comes with art sometimes, because like if you have that type of experience, you're able to tell, hey, if they're like that 14, 13, 12 timers, like, all right, I can do it.
Yeah.
And you have like 10 people behind you, but if it's counting down to 5, or I have 10 people behind me, I need to start saying slowing, stopping.
Yeah.
So it really comes to like really noticing the street signs.
Yeah.
If you're pulling, because you don't have to wait on somebody behind you to tell you, hey, we gotta stop. Like, no, you're the one pulling. You should be making the decision. Be like, hey, we're stopping. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because this is really good for the other rider.
Yeah. Any questions on that? I do think the team overall was very good about this, you know, like keeping the group together. Occasionally you get new riders that aren't familiar with how to ride and don't take care of everybody else, but for the most part, it's pretty good.
Yeah, generally speaking, if you haven't been to a group ride, one of the benefits, another one of the benefits is that you'll become more familiar with the people that you're riding with. So people that have been on the team for a while, I'm either comfortable or I'm not comfortable getting on the wheel. And you'll pretty much know if you're a rider too, this is someone I want to suck on this wheel, I want to avoid this wheel like the plague. And that's just the truth, unfortunately, of the matter. So yeah, the more that you ride with the group, the more comfortable you're going to be, or uncomfortable with certain people. You don't want to do the first time during the MS 150. You want to be familiar with the team, and generally speaking, we all watch after each other. Generally speaking, there is an exception.
If we have a group like in Arnold riders and like some other folks try to jump in with us, I'll tell them like get the fuck out, right? Like, no offense. It's great that you want to pull, but like you get to the back, we're riding as a group. You can draft after us, that's fine. But we're doing our thing. We don't want any people that we don't know in our group.
So Peter brings up a good point, especially when we do the MS 150 or recommended ride. We'll probably have 20-ish in a group, 30-ish in a group. And if another team comes in, if you're falling from the front to the back and then you see another group, just tell them, hey, do you mind if I get in front of you so I can be a part of my team? If you want to let them pull, great, but generally speaking, you don't want them within the line. Unless you know who they are or you're comfortable with them. Generally speaking.
Was there a question back there?
Question?
Yeah, are we gonna cover yo-yoing and coasting? Are we gonna cover yo-yoing and coasting?
I don't think I have anything specific in there for that right now.
So I've been away from you for 6 years. I missed you guys so much. I'm back. I know.
We didn't miss you.
I know. Fair enough. But one of the things I loved, yesterday was so awesome because nobody was coasting. And again, just the whole concept, you know, when you're in the pace line, just staying with a consistent pace and not coasting when you go back, you go forward, everybody has some breaks. It's just it just makes life so much better.
Kind of the definition.
Right. Right, pace line. So just
What also comes down to your endurance. If you can't pedal, then you gotta do that. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but it's also in your endurance. Not everyone can pedal, keep their cadence at 85, 90, whatever the entire time. Some people do have to coast. That's just something you get with experience. Generally speaking, you want to keep your cadence with someone that's in front of you. But sometimes they'll slow down and you have to coast, or you went too fast, you're gonna have to coast to slow down. There are exceptions to every rule.
absolutely.
But generally speaking, you want to try keeping the same pace in front of you. Generally.
And we'll get more into pace lines here in a little bit. So right now we're talking about, we're going to slide for rest stops. Believe it or not, rest stops is where like a large percentage of accidents happen on the MS ride, right? Why is that? Because people are stopping and starting. Mostly it's a stopping piece that gets people. If you're hot and tired, you're not paying attention as much. A lot of times people have problems clipping out. You know, you've been practicing it, but you get tired, you don't have the muscle memory. So the guy in front of you falls over, and then you run into them because you're tired, you weren't paying attention. The other things you got gravel, and you got mud, you got a lot of traffic because people are slowing down and pulling out, people pull out in front of you. So just be aware of rest stops and those hazards. Most of the time, they will try and have the rest stops on the right side. And so if you're exiting for the rest stop, stay to the right. If you're going to bypass and get to the left, try and figure that out as a group before you get to the rest stop. Usually there's a sign like a mile in advance, like rest stop 1 mile. So start talking to the guys in the team. Are we stopping? Are we going? Does anybody need to pee? Does anybody need water? Sometimes you split up, sometimes you all stop, sometimes you all keep going, but whatever it is, you need to figure it out so that when you get there, you're not like doing this, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, in each group will say, you all want to stop. And if one person says yes, then usually we will. But if you say, hey, there's another rest stop in 10-ish miles, and you hold it, they say yeah, then just keep on going. But yeah, stay to the left. Because everyone that's going in the rest stop is going to be to the right.
And for the MS ride itself, like the first 3 rest stops tend to be really busy.
Avoid like the flood.
If you can hold it, it's to your advantage.
When pulling off that rest stop, it's another great opportunity to communicate with the people around you.
Yep.
Let them know, slowing, stopping, rolling, get up behind, like that really helps. Because people in front of you are, when you start talking, they'll start talking, and then everyone starts talking, and people will run into each other.
Yep.
Be vocal. There's nothing, you're going to have a few people saying you don't need to yell, you don't need to say that. They can pound sand. We care about ourselves because, again, we want to get back to drink beer. We get priorities.
And every once in a while, we will have a left-hand exit to the rest stop. You know, we try not to, but sometimes they do have it.
Caters. Yeah, the
I
Cater
think
one
the
on
last
the
couple
left.
years it's
They
been on the
closed.
left, yeah.
Oh, because we started at Royal now instead of Energy or Legacy.
And always, you know, listen to the volunteers and whatever they tell you.
Legacy, that was the first stop after Legacy, and Legacy's now. I know exactly which stop you're talking about.
All right, let's anticipate it. Railroad crossings. These are a good way to fall off your bike if you cross them incorrectly. So if you want to fall, try and get as close to parallel to the track as possible.
Perpendicular.
If you want to fall.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to stay upright, go perpendicular.
Reverse psychology.
I tricked you. So you can see here in the picture, you've got tracks at almost 45 degrees, right? So in order to go perpendicular, you're having to cross into the other lane and come back, right? When you're doing this, Is everybody on the road gonna do the same thing? No. Some of them are just gonna go straight. So somebody's on your left, you start talking and be like, hey, like there's railroad tracks coming up, either get in front of them or get behind them, so that you have the space to do what you need to do if they don't, right? And likewise, if you decide not to do this, the person on your right might run into you. Or even if you are taking a tack at it, right? Like there's somebody on your right, maybe they take a more aggressive turn into those tracks than you do. So it's just something to be aware of. I promise this works a lot better with my computer.
Apple sucks.
Yeah, so another example of a railroad crossing. Also at a pretty high angle. This one, they actually have like a little cutout in the street you can see, so you can go to your right and then back to your left. If you have room to go to the right first, that's always good. So you can kind of like stay in that same lane. You can avoid going in to a different lane. That's preferable. If you are going to change lanes in order to do this, use your scanning, check to make sure there's not traffic.
As long as you get a 30-degree angle on that, you're okay.
Generally, yeah. But like down in the port, the tracks are pretty much parallel to you. And it's not good, like on what's in Front Road or whatever, where those tracks are essentially just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally in our groups, we'll say really bad tracks, slow, slow, slow. And that tells you we are not going to go fast. Bad things are about to happen.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the condition of the roadway, right? Like what angle you can accommodate. Perpendicular is always going to be okay, right? If the tracks have good pavement close to them, then yeah, like 30 degrees you can probably get away with. But like there was one year toward Houston. I forget what road it was on like in Edo somewhere. There was like Houston? Yeah, toward Houston. Like I stopped doing that right a long time ago, so it's been a while. But the pavement was all torn up in front of the tracks. So you had like almost like a 2-inch elevation gain when you hit the tracks. And so as I was approaching it, there were like 2 people on the ground. So I stopped to go like, I was a ride car at the time. So I stopped to go help these 2 people, and like in the 30 seconds I stopped, 3 more people hit the pavement. Like it was just like it was a cluster. So like if the conditions are bad, like even if you go close to perpendicular, you got to be almost dead on perpendicular, or else it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, plus the speed obviously is important.
Yeah. And how tightly you're holding those handlebars, right?
Yeah.
Are you ready for it? Any questions on railroad tracks? Alright. Who wants to see videos? Anyone? Alright. So I redid the presentation from last year. This presentation was originally done in like 2007, I think. And the slides, I've kind of updated them over time. But the League of American Bicyclists has like this core education program that I pulled. I took the League's new presentation as the baseline for this presentation, and deleted all the slides that I didn't think were really relevant to what we do for group riding skills. And then I had to like pull all the old slides that they didn't have in, and I couldn't get the videos to like work with the PowerPoint yet, so I gotta exit real quick. We'll show you the videos. Don't play this Apple thing.
Make sure it's the right video, you don't put the wrong thing in.
But this isn't my computer, so any of those videos might
Bad. Just something
I'm trying to play videos. Alright.
Last year.
Alright, so sad news. It worked on my computer, but because we changed rooms, and then I had to like move stuff onto a different computer. It's an Apple, and I can't figure out how to make the videos work on Apple. So I can post some videos on the Facebook thing if you guys want to go back and look at them later. There's a couple scary scenarios on why you should do things the way we tell you to. Yes. Awesome. There's a nice one where like this guy's riding down the road, right next to some parked cars, and right as he passes, like this door opens, you know, so you think he's gonna like wow. Yeah. Alright, so this is a good scenario from the old slide deck. This is a good example of something that we see on a lot of group rides in the Houston area, especially on the west side. This is a good time for a beer, right? Like trains going by, find some near me.
We discovered train tracks, so like.
Yeah. Alright. So when you're riding out in the country, sometimes you'll have a shoulder that you're using to ride on, and you come up with this new development of houses, and your shoulder turns into a turn lane. And some people might be tempted to, well, I'm in the shoulder already, traffic's kind of fast, I'll just stay in the shoulder/turn lane. But I think we had some good slides earlier kind of talked about like, well, what happens if you stay in a lane and somebody's potentially going to be in a car and they're going to turn in, right? They can turn in front of you. The other thing is, if there's a car over here that's getting ready to pull out, if you're in the turn lane, they think you're going to turn, right? And so when you're like right here, about to cross in front of them, they may pull out because they disregarded you. They're like, okay, well this guy, he's going to turn into the neighborhood. I don't have to worry about him, right? So you always want to communicate what you're doing by being in the proper lane. You can, in extreme scenario, like if it's just not safe to be in this lane just going straight, ride right on this line, just to the right of it, in that turn lane. That's the best thing you can do. If you have to be in that turn lane, to kind of signal that, hey, I'm going straight, I'm not actually turning.
I guess a lot of times too, in the scenario, make the driver has their attention, just so they don't, pull that out in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do this number, if you look at like eye contact, right? Like, what am I doing? Hand signals.
There's some places on, like yesterday on Clay Road, there's places where it says right turn only except bikes. In that case, would you still recommend kind of doing this and going, or like just signal and saying we're doing we're following the sign that goes ahead?
So if it says the bicycles can go straight, I would make sure you're in that left side of the lane, right? Like you never want to be in the right side of the lane if you're gonna go straight.
Yeah, because cars tend to just want to get in front of them.
And it just puts you like in a more visible position, right? Any other questions? Alright, so a little bit about how to ride efficiently. You want to be able to use those gears, right? So if you don't know how to use your gears yet, like find somebody, figure out how to shift your gears in a good spot. A good spot is this 75 to 95 RPM most of the time, right? If you're going uphill, that can change. If you're staying on the seat, you want to go with a higher cadence, like 110, 120 if you're comfortable with it. Reduces the amount of stress on your knees. Or you can stand up on a hill. Typically, standing up gives you more power but less efficiency, right? So if you can't manage sitting down, you want to stand up, but generally it's better to sit than to stand. In the long run, but if you gotta stand up, or you just want to stand up to get up the hill faster, that is an option. And when you stand up, the cadence typically drops more like 50 or 60 yards.
So question, I typically stand up when it's a last resort. Is that kind of like a good way of thinking about it, or?
It's a little bit different for everybody. It depends on what you practice first and foremost, right? Like if you go to a bunch of spin classes, a lot of times they have like standing exercises, right? If you're used to standing, it does give you more power. You can get up the hill faster and get to the downhill and recovery sooner, right? So if you're interested in going faster and getting out of the hill quicker, then you may want to stand. If you're worried about efficiency, then you want to sit. Generally. I mean, there's also the whole like it kind of helps to change things up from time to time, right? Like you use a little bit different muscles standing versus sitting. So maybe if there's a bunch of hills, you sit for one, you stand for one. The one thing you don't want to do is like to stand up, get halfway up the hill and get tired, and then sit down, right? If you're only going to stand for a little while, do it at the end of the hill. Does that make sense?
If it doesn't make sense, physics will tell you.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you pedal downhill, right? You don't have to pedal hard. You don't even have to apply force to the pedals. You just want your legs to move, right? Because when you're working hard, you build up lactic acid in your legs, and when your muscles move, it helps to clear it. If you just stay stationary, that lactic acid just sits there, it doesn't clear as fast. And that's what causes cramps at the end of the ride. What you got, Aaron?
It also helps the people in the back. So, like, let's say you're the one in the front and you stop pedaling, then everybody else is coasting. You're taking all the wind, and they're gonna get really close to your back wheel. So if you're pedaling and you're like fighting against that downhill wind, that's fine. Then the people behind you are not getting as close.
Yeah. So this slide is really like individual focus, right? As a group, if we're going up a hill, we're concerned about maintaining a relatively steady effort / pace, right? You're not going to go as fast up the hill as down the hill. Generally, we want to try and keep the group together. So if you like getting up out of the saddle, that's great, but it gives you more power. If you drop 100% going uphill out of the saddle, you're going to drop people, right? And then again, like Aaron said, when you're going downhill, if you're at the front, it's really good that you actually do pedal a little bit, because everybody behind you has it easier, right? So if you're not pedaling, they're going to be braking.
Yeah.
And you're adjusting your gears going uphill
And downhill.
when you're flat and
Yep.
when you're downhill. So that if you're new, like that's something you're gonna have to like experiment with a little bit to find what position you're new, especially if you are riding with a group. But I strongly encourage like practicing that because it makes you more efficient once you learn what to do.
Low gear going up, high gear going down.
So you want to get the easier gear before you start going up.
Yeah, you want to shift down before you need it,
Yeah.
right? Like you see people on hills, they drop their chains, and the time that you drop chains is when you have a lot of tension in the chain because you're in a higher gear than you should have been. So you're going like 40 RPM. So your RPMs are low, which means your force is very high. The tension in the chain is very high. When you go to shift to a lower gear, you pop it, right?
Recommendations on how to track cadence. Sensor on your crank or like Strava or.
I mean, a sensor on the crank is the best way I know of. I don't know of Strava having a way outside of a sensor.
Strong garments.
Yeah.
Does anybody really have control when they're out of the saddle?
What do you mean by control?
It takes a lot of practice to have control of your steering when you're standing up on hill. I don't have that kind of experience, and I'm not going to practice it that enough to be controlled.
I mean, like anything you do in a group, you want to know how to do it before you do it in a group, right? Whether it's standing up in the saddle, grabbing a water bottle, knowing how to shift your gears.
That's why y'all should be on training rides now rather than March, April.
Changing positions in the.
Yeah, changing positions in your handlebars, eating a goo while riding in a group. Important skill to have. What's your water bottle at? Different pace line rotations we're going to talk about later. Anything you're not comfortable with in a pace line, try and get in the back of the group before you do those things, right? And ask for help if you need it. So as far as nutrition and hydration goes, drink before you're thirsty, eat before you're hungry. If you're hungry and thirsty on a bike ride, you're in trouble already, right? A lot of this comes down to ride-specific conditions and rider-specific needs, right? Like it's different for everybody, and it changes from day to day. If it's hot out, you're gonna have to drink a whole lot more.
If you're hungover, you're gonna drink a lot more.
Yeah, guilty. Your body can only absorb so many nutrients, like at a time. So you got to kind of learn what your limit is for how much you can take over a given amount of time. And then you also got to look at like how many fluids you're losing depending on how hot it is, right? A lot of times during the summer, I need 3 water bottles, right? Mary can get by with 2.
5. And it depends on how much you sweat. Some people sweat like pigs. Me. Some people don't sweat at all. It's about sweat going out and then electrolytes coming back in. Ish. Or need beer. Yeah.
So the diluted drinks absorb faster. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, or kind of depends? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're talking about electrolytes.
I think the MS-150 has that safety training survey and video, and they go over, like, I think timing of
hydration. Yeah, I mean,
Was it generally 16 ounces every hour, but it's not high, and then 16 every 30 minutes if it's hot? Everybody's different.
Yeah,
So don't drink Prime Energy, it's bullshit.
If it's hot, I'll do like 70 hours.
Yeah, ish. Aaron?
So, whenever I started riding, somebody told me drink a water bottle per hour. However, that's given depending on your body, how it takes hydration. If it's too hot, you might have to be a little bit more. If it's cool like yesterday, it might have been a little bit less. But as the more you ride your body, you can tell how much your body, like, how you're going to be receiving it. So whenever you start riding more, you'll be able to tell, like, okay, what's my hit point? Because it does depend per rider.
Yeah. Now, is your electrolytes water or something, or excuse me, is your hydration water or something with electrolytes?
So I have one water bottle with water, just straight water, and then another one with Gatorade or other type of electrolyte.
And do you do half and half per hour?
So I would do half. I grab from the back one, like half an hour, and then the front one half an hour. So yeah, I mix it.
So that's something else for the training rides. You learn what works best for you. Someone may need a bunch of rehydration. Some people can get away with none. But you need to know that before the MS-150 because it's too late. Some people can do goose. I can't do goose. Some people can do peanut butter Snickers, which is God's gift to cyclists. Some people can't eat that. But now's the time for you to train or figure out what works best for you. You have a question?
Well, I was gonna say,
Hold on, we got a question.
wait, I was gonna say, my bike frame is not big enough to fit 2 water bottles. Is there another option of
Buy a new bike.
You can get a mount like right here. It'll hold 2 water bottles. It goes behind your saddle.
So when you're
When I was crazy, I had 4 water bottles.
Because I drink a lot of water, and I tried a camelback, but it was.
But in your jersey pocket has 3 spots for the water bottle. But I would get something on the bike. You can get something behind the seat.
Okay, good to
I
know.
think there's also a brand called Finlock that makes like mounts that you can strap to your frame, and they can add a water mount to it.
You can also get a side entry gauge. So you get a side entry cage where instead of pulling it straight out of the cage, you can go to the side.
Okay, I'll have to look.
Right? So for a smaller crane, that might work.
Why would you not want to let somebody fall behind?
Don't make me get the ruler.
So, a reason why I would think that you don't want electric lights all the time, I'm a heavy sweater, and I sweat very salty, like literally whenever my sweat gets to my handlebars, it's to the point where it almost rusts it. So, a reason why you don't want to be drinking Gatorade or like any other electrolyte drink is because you need water in your body. I mean, you guys
It's salt.
Well, you can only absorb so many electrolytes per hour, right?
Yeah.
You can absorb water faster. So if you're needing more water than you can get from the Gatorade at the rate you can absorb Gatorade, then you need more water. That makes sense.
It's also a thirst kind of feeling to it. Too. I feel it like half and half because I feel like the water kind of quenches my thirst versus like the other.
I mean, if you get too many electrolytes in your stomach, you'll
Have the recommended whatever.
And it's also, I think people need to realize that 230-pound guy like me is different than a 150-pound. I'm at 220. I mean, in the end, I'll take more water in than somebody that weighs half my size.
Yeah.
Right? So it's also fine.
So I think the biggest thing to know as a new rider is like test all this stuff out before the big ride. Don't go try out Thai food the first night before. Don't get a new Powerade or Gatorade. And Gatorade comes in a whole bunch of different variants now. There's like the 0-calorie Gatorade, there's original stuff. There's endurance Gatorade, which is like double the sugar, double the electrolytes, same amount of volume. I think that stuff is terrible. But some events actually they provide that, right? And so if I was at one of those events, I would fill my bottle with half G2 and half water because it was just too sweet for me, right? You got to know those kind of things. For a few years, the MS-150 used Cytomax as their rest stop fluid.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
And there's something in Cytomax that like, I don't know if it's like aspartame or something like it made me want to throw up just like putting it in my mouth, right? So like you gotta know about that. I'm pretty sure that this year it'll be Gatorade or Powerade like it was last year. I don't think they're doing Cytomax or anything like that. But there's something to think about. But as far as the types of things that you want to eat and drink, you're looking for carbohydrates primarily. A little bit of protein is helpful. Like from what I've read, like you can substitute protein for carbohydrates, but you don't want to do all protein, and you don't want to do many fats while you're riding. Right? It's hard to absorb fats. All right, yeah, sneak preview. All right, pace lines. What everybody wants to talk about, right? All right, pace lines are wonderful, especially on the St. Arnold's team. You can save a bunch of effort, you can go a lot faster, get there quicker, drink more beer. Right? They can be dangerous, right? So we talked a little bit earlier like stranger danger. You always got to be cognizant of people in your pace lines that haven't been there before, right? Like, what are they going to do? Like, are they going to meet expectations? Starting on pace lines, we want to like throw down the hammer at the stoplight and leave everybody in our dust. Or do we take a moderate acceleration at the front of the line and let everybody stay together?
We're gonna say moderate acceleration.
Yeah. There's nothing better than like pulling really hard for the group, tapping out, going to the back of the line, getting to a stoplight, and then having to like bust your butt to keep up with the group as they leave the light. When you're like dead tired because you've been pulling for like 3 minutes into the wind. Stopping, we're all trying to like, get as much efficiency as we can by staying close. If we stop without letting anybody know, there's a high risk of danger right there, right? And then we talked a little bit earlier like road hazards. These are our teammates. We want to keep them safe. Tell them anything and everything we see that could be a hazard to them. Spacing. to get a good draft, you want to be about a wheel width behind. You know, if you're really comfortable, you get a little bit closer. If you're not comfortable, you go a little bit further. If you're more than like a bicycle length behind somebody, you're not really getting much benefit, right? So if you're in the middle of the pace line and you're a whole bicycle length behind, then you're not just hurting yourself, but you're hurting everybody else behind you, right? So if you're not comfortable like being that 1 to 2 wheels behind somebody, then you should probably just kind of float in the back until you get more comfortable riding the group. Does that make sense?
Are you gonna talk about how we like to rotate out of pace lines?
Yeah, I got slides on how different rotations work.
Probably the most important thing about pace lines though is the pace.
Yeah, so you want
run the line and you're doing 16 and you roll to the back and then the next guy thinks it's really good and he goes 18 and then the next guy goes 14. That's not good. I mean, you gotta have a pace line, you should all be doing the same pace, right?
pretty close, right? You definitely should not throw the hammer down as the guy in front of you peels off, right? That's just like impolite. You want to let the guy who was leading the group and doing all the hard work get in line before he has to work his butt off. Get situated. Keep the pace the same. We don't want to change the pace a whole lot from rider to rider. Sometimes somebody's got a little bit more energy, like you bump it up a mile or 2 per hour. I think that's okay. If you're riding in a group and you can't maintain the pace that the group is going at the front, right? It's okay to go really quick, right? It's better to go 30 seconds at the pace the group is going at than to drop the pace 4 miles per hour and stay there for 5 minutes, right? Does that make sense? Right? Nobody's going to say bad things about you because you were quick on your rotation. They probably might start to comment if you're up there for a long time at a much slower pace. They won't say anything if you go really, really fast because you won't see them again. All right, so our standard pace line formation is single file. Typically, you want to peel off from the front of the line to the left. And the reason I say to the left and not the right is because that's where the traffic is. So you're only exposing one rider to traffic as opposed to the whole line. So the line can stay to the right. Like with any maneuver where you're changing position, you want to make sure that the traffic is clear before you peel off. I think a good time to peel off is like right before you get to light, because it gives it time. Like if you're stopping anyways, you can tap out and be like, all right, and just let the line go by, and let everybody stops and get to the back of the line and lets everybody situate. It's a good time for that to happen if you're ready. And as far as like when you're riding the pace line, I think the most common signal, like you tap your butt to say that you're tapping out, and also helps to say something, tapping out or whatever. Any other comments on that?
Rider on the.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to tap on the side that you're.
Yeah, tap to the side that you're going to move to. But it should be consistent amongst the group. So a couple of thoughts, last questions for you on pace line. So as a group, you can decide what pace are we going at, what duration is each person going to be at, what rotation is it going to be? Are we going to the left? Are we going to the right? We're talking about double pace lines and echelons and things. So like what is the formation, and then the spacing. We talked a little bit about stoplights and dropping. Is this a no drop group, or is it every man for himself? Typically, at St. Arnold, we try not to drop people, but sometimes if you're in the A group and somebody is really a C group rider and they happen to be with you, you're not going to drop pace like 5 miles per hour because one person can't make it. That being said, when you're riding with a group, you can't rely on the group to know where you're going, right? Like everybody needs to make sure that you have the maps for where we're going for that day, you know where the rest stops are. Generally, the group is pretty nice about keeping somebody with you. If somebody's struggling, usually somebody will stay with you. Whether it's, I can't keep pace, or if you have a flat tire, almost always somebody's gonna stop with you if you have a flat tire.
So I'll comment on that. So we usually post on Facebook like the rides for that day. And if you're new or just like kind of not sure and getting back into biking, like if you want to post like, hey, I'm going about this day, so I'm new. Like who should I be riding with? We're usually very friendly about what pace to go. And if like you don't want to be dropped into the same group, we'll kind of coordinate that beforehand or even the morning of. So don't be afraid to post in our Facebook event for that day to determine who you should be riding with. Right? A lot of our seasoned riders know who to ride with, but a lot of our new people know who to ride with. Don't be afraid to post on the Facebook groups what your pace might be. Or if you're not sure, like, hey, I'm new, I don't know, you're probably in our C group, for lack of a better word, and we can connect you with who's going to be riding that day. Yeah, see me freshman.
And I think it's really great, like if you want to push yourself and try like that next group up,
Yeah.
right? And you can always get picked up by the next group that's coming.
Yeah.
But sometimes the A group will go 50 and the B group will only go 45. So know what distances everybody's going to go at. And if you're going to get dropped, make sure you get dropped on the route when the next group is coming, if you're worried about having a group, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to ride solo or with one other person. All right, so here we have a double pace line. So a lot of times if there's room and we have a big group, we'll go to a double pace line so it's more compact, right? So a double pace line, you're almost always going to have each line peel off to the outside and come back. This graphic shows both lines peeling off at the same time, which I really hate. Yeah. I mean, if we have a closed road and there's plenty of space and you can have room to do that, that's one thing. But most of the time we're really stretching it, having two lines, you know? And so it's much better if one person peels off, they get all the way to the back, and then the other person peels off and they go all the way back. And sometimes there might be a couple minutes between this, but if you can just make sure it doesn't happen at exactly the same time, that way we're not going 4 abreast, we're only 3 abreast. It makes things a lot better. And the same thing as a single pace line, you cap when you're rotating. With the double pace line, obviously you've got, if you're at the front, you've got a buddy, right? So if you can't see your buddy, you need to slow down. Any pace line, when the person in front drops, you maintain the pace. You don't speed up. So nothing's different with the double pace line. But if one person drops and the other line doesn't, now you have this like disconnect, right? One's one wheel in front. So let the lead person slow down. We don't want to speed up the other line and make anybody work like extra hard. Right? Any questions on that? Not too hard. We're getting to the really challenging stuff here in a second. Aha! Rotating pace line. Anybody done a rotating pace line? Yeah. It's a bike around the bay specialty so far. So why would we do a rotating pace line instead of just a normal double pace line?
Because really only one person's working. Especially like a person.
Well, I would argue that like half the team is working. If you're doing this for the right reason. So the times we've done this is because you have a terrible crosswind, right? So if the wind is coming from right to left, like top of the screen to the bottom of the screen, you might be doing 40% extra effort in the right line versus the left line. And so we had a couple of bike around the bays where we had a great group of like 40 riders, and we get to like mile 30 and there's this big open plain, this horrendous crosswind, and you get like 5 miles into it and you look back and like there's 3 people in one line and like 15 in the other. Because the people that were exposed to crosswind just kept dropping, right? They were like, 110% effort, and they were like 5th or 6th in the line, and the people on the other side, like they were getting blocked from the crosswind, but then like as the people on the one line kept dropping, the other line dropped. So in those situations when you have a strong crosswind, a rotating pace line can spread the effort out evenly across all the riders, right? It's a challenging thing to enact, right? Like a single pace line, a double pace line, someone who's new to pace lines, you can bring them in, you can teach them up pretty quick, and if they don't quite get it all, like it's not a huge deal. The rotating pace line, if one person does something a little bit goofy, it throws the whole thing off, right? So what we have done in the past is we've stopped at a rest stop with our group that was doing a regular pace line, and we said, hey, we want to do a rotating pace line. Let's practice it like just as people, not on bicycles, but just like, hey, let's get 6 people in a line, like right here. All right, and practice rotating, you know, like we're gonna go up, go back, all right, we're gonna go in a circle, right? And what I found to be helpful with this is instead of having a dynamic situation where you're constantly rotating, which is what the pros do it, is if you do like 30-second pulls, and then you call out rotate. Everybody shifts one position. It's much easier to like get everybody on the same page than trying to like do it from themselves. But this will help you tremendously if you have a really bad crosswind. If you're jonesing for something to do on a group ride, like it's too easy, you can go practice this. You know, so in case there is a crosswind later on, you know, you gotta go practice on it. But any questions? If you do hit that really bad crosswind, like you gotta recognize it fast, or you will lose the group quick. If you're not gonna do this, at least find some way to rotate the people from one line to the other, right? The other thing you can do in a strong crosswind, there's a couple more slides. You gotta have a lot of space for this, obviously, right? But you can do an angled echelon, right? So if the wind's coming from an angle, you all kind of get that angle. And it depends on how fast you're going, because your pace changes that angle, right? The faster you're going, the narrower the angle is. There's not a ton of situations you can do this in. And I mean, this one's with a double line. A double line is very difficult to do, but if you have 4 or 5 riders, like that it's manageable. If you have a full lane, you can spread out in like a wing. In a smaller group or a smaller space, just something to think about, right? Like you can angle like the first 1 or 2 riders to where you shift over the line, like 1 and 2 in the line are to the right, and then like the rest of the line is like 1 over to the left or something like that, to kind of give a little bit of extra break to the people on the pace line. And so that's all the slides. If anyone wants to go outside, what we're going to do. Outside? There's a hazard avoidance, well, a couple hazard avoidance maneuvers. The quick stop, the rock dodge, an avoidance weave, the instant turn we're not going to do, but just talk about it in case you want to know. The quick stop is the best skill you could know out of this class from an on the bike standpoint, and it's a method for stopping as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? If something gets thrown down in front of you and you got to stop really fast, this is how you do it. So it's about positioning your weight, using both brakes, and getting that stop as fast as possible.
Can you talk about when you slam on both brakes where your weight should go?
No. Okay, no bars.
So we'll talk about that. We can talk about it in case anybody leaves. So when you're stopping, if you're trying to stop quickly, if we hit the front brake, we do that, right? Bad. We don't. That doesn't help us stop. But if you only hit the rear brake, you won't end over, but you're not going to stop as quickly. To stop as quickly as possible, you need to use both brakes. But you want to push down as hard as possible on the left brake without lifting the front wheel.
That takes
Right.
trial and error.
Would it be more on the right and then that goes to the left? Because the left is your front one.
Yeah, well, but you don't want either tire to skid, right?
So stay seated.
You
Don't-
can't push the brakes so hard you skid because for all of us who took physics, like static friction is stronger than dynamic friction, right? Sorry, I'm an engineer.
What?
You don't want to stop. You don't want to stop the wheel.
Yeah, shit happens.
Imagine happens, but the idea behind the quick stop is you position your weight like behind the saddle as much as possible, as low and as far back as possible, because that creates the most resistance to doing the end over, right? That allows you to apply the most brake force. And so, if anyone wants to go outside and do it, we'll talk more about it then, do demonstrations.
So we're gonna do the butt test.
I mean, if anybody wants to, if everybody is happy, then we don't have to.
Someone that did the front wheel.
I need you to do the butt test.
Yeah.
With a brake test where you go all the way back and hit your butt on the back wheel.
The other drill that we have is called the rock dodge. We're almost, we got 3 slides, I promise.
You said it was last slide.
Well, that was last.
Liar.
It's like communicating slide. Now we're talking about we're talking about outside stuff now.
Folks want to see last hill legit. Last hill does not mean last hill.
I mean, the longer we stay inside, the more you can drink beer, right? Because they can still pour, and he doesn't like cut us off. I mean, you can all just say like, you know what? We can skip the grill and we just drink more beer.
Yes.
So the rock dodge is a maneuver. It's a concept that we talked a little bit about earlier. Like your rear wheel is very stable, right? It can't rotate. So if there's a hazard on the road in front of you, that could cause a problem if you were to run over it. You only need to avoid it with your front wheel. So if you're in a group, there's somebody to your right, and there's somebody to your left. You can't just go peeling off in either direction. If you rotate your wheel quickly in either direction, your back wheel doesn't change direction, but your front wheel avoids an object. And it could be a rock, it could be a pothole, it could be somebody's water bottle because there's only lots of those out on an MS-150. It could be a traffic cone. I've taken a traffic cone over my back wheel. It's not fun, but I survived. So the idea behind the rock dodge is stay in a straight line, avoid an obstacle with your front tire. If your back tire hits it, it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. Mostly. A very large traffic cone will get caught up in your whole like drivetrain mechanism. A rock, not so much. And then there's like this avoidance weave that we can do, where it's just kind of talking about or practicing bike maneuvers, or showing that you can swerve back and forth very very quickly at tight speeds. And we're not going to do this today, but the league does have training on, we used to call it a quick turn, now we're calling it an instant turn. But it's similar to the quick stop, but it's like, how can you turn really, really fast? So if you don't want to try the quick stop, how do you throw your weight around and reposition yourself to make a really quick turn? And it's a good thing to know, like, just from a bike family perspective. So we have, if you're looking for more resources, St. Arnold's Bike Team Facebook page is a great place to ask questions. There's tons of people who like to give their opinions.
On our Facebook page, or you can always just send a message to info@SaintArnoldBikeTeam or SaintArnoldBikeTeam@gmail.com. That's me. Or do it on Instagram. Depending if we have a ride or not, my answer is going to be super serious. It's going to be very drunk.
But in all seriousness,
Yeah, seriously, no, we drink after rides, not during or before. Typically.
The League of American Bicyclists, if you go to bikeleague.org or just type in like LAB and search for it, or League of American Bicyclists, they have a bunch of trainings. They'll cover a lot of things we talked about today and some other things. They have videos. The MS 150 website, they have a new rider orientation PDF with like 12 slides or
Oh
something.
yeah, they're not even doing this anymore. Now it's a slide. It's a slideshow.
Are they doing it in person?
Yeah, they had one carve off in January.
Oh, no, that's new rider.
Oh, that's new rider orientation. The MS 150 has a new rider orientation class. There is a PDF. They used to sponsor a group riding skills class, which is what this was, right? They still reference a group riding skills class. They have not offered it for 3 or 4 years. So, I guess they haven't decided if they're going to bring it back post-COVID or not. I don't know. I don't know if Jeff can provide my perspective.
With actual rides.
You know anything about the future of GRS classes? The group riding skills classes, right? Is the MS Society still? Well, what did they say about it last year?
Like it did exist.
Still recovered from COVID, yeah. So they shut these classes down for COVID, they haven't gone back, that's all I really know.
No! Well, in a little minute, for a few more minutes, it's almost done.
Yeah. Okay.
And some of the smaller ones don't, they offer now. But since you're doing this for us, that's team check.
That's why I always stress, y'all need to come do this or something with anyone else.
Like how many hours?
So you have to take a Road 1 course, which is like a generic to the public class, 8 hours. It's like this class on steroids. So every slide has like 5 to follow up on it, and then you spend like 3 hours on the bike class. You've taken it, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
So you have like 3 hours of drills outside and like a big group ride. You practice all the skills. And that's just you've taken a group riding class, League of American Bicycles class. Then there's an all weekend, like 4 hours on Friday, 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday, LCI certification class.
What I'm trying to say is he knows what he's talking about.
Do they pour beer throughout this?
There is no beer in this class.
No beer.
Yes, no beer.
Just to clarify. Yeah.
Alright, so that was it. So the next thing on our agenda is who would like to go outside and do bike drills? Anyone? It's completely optional. It's valuable, but at the same time, I can understand if you don't want to. If anyone does not know how to change a flat tire, it seems like nobody wants to do the outside section. I would be happy to show you how to change a flat tire right now. Right?
I would say if you have this way,
Right there, go around, flat tire. Absolutely.
Alright. So we're all agreed we're going to stay inside and we're going to change flat tires and nobody's doing drills. Alright? I mean,
Is yours too close or not?
this is the 2011 tire. Right? The tire, it looks fancy, but it's not. I put the money in the wheels, the tire crash, and I was like, I put all the money in the wheels.
Yeah, that's fair. My bike goes like
lean over and put your elbows on the pads. And then there's shifters on the end of your bars. The rest go back. Like that, all the water.
Tired because I never got flat tire.
Oh, no, you just So we need to get Peter downstairs because he needs to start paying. He's got shit to do.